Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. So, I will say today's episode is a juicy one because we are going to be diving into everything that you need to know about mastering mental performance, or better known as high performance, as a business owner, a brand, a CEO. This is a topic that I will tell you, I have been very selective about who I was going to bring on to talk about this because one of the most important things for anybody who speaks about high performance is that you are not someone who just looks at this as theory, but you really deeply embody the values of what it is that you teach. And Karina, who I am joined by today, is an absolute embodiment of all of those things. We are going to be diving into how to understand what mental performance is, understanding how you might be able to tap into this piece of yourself to really expand you and your business to the next level, and also what mental performance and high performance is not. And Karina's going to share some really incredible stories today, a lot of amazing insights and tips and things that you can take action on very quickly. So I will say, of all episodes, this is one you're going to want to get a notepad out for because there's a lot of reflection that is going to be happening as a byproduct of today's episode. So, all of that to say, let's get into today's episode. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Ambitious. I am so excited for today because the topic we're covering today, I was just noting before we pressed record that I have been very selective about who we brought on and how we were going to facilitate today's conversation, because high performance is something that a lot of us, I feel like, see in the online world, in the entrepreneurship space, the morning routines, the ice baths, all of the different processes of what it looks like to be a quote unquote hardcore entrepreneur. And I think, just as we were noting before hitting record, it can kind of get a little bit convoluted when we think about what is the quote unquote right way. How do we tap into going for those big goals and going for the big dreams, but also making sure we're not doing so in a way that leads us to burnout? So, very excited, Karina, to have you on today. And I just cannot wait to unpack. There's so much, and I know we're probably going to go right to time today. So, I'll get right into it. Karina, tell for anyone who's listening who maybe hasn't been yet exposed to your stuff. And guys, as she goes through today, you're going to understand why she is the person to come on and talk about this with her story. But if you haven't checked out her stuff yet, you can definitely go to her Instagram to learn more. But Karina, give us like the high level of kind of like, how did you get into high performance and mental performance that you talk about now?
Yeah, first of all, not even like a full intro, and I'm feeling so flattered. Thank you so much for having me. That was amazing. So for anyone who is like, what the hell is performance and mental performance and all those things, my formal title is mental performance coach. So what that means is I have a master's degree in sport and performance psychology. So originally, a lot of us get into the field to primarily work with athletes, like high level athletes, ideally like college, professional, Olympic level athletes. And then we kind of like expanded our field into the business world, into high performance outside of college athletics or, professional athletics. But originally the field did start with sport, which, makes a sense of like sport and performance psychology. How I got into it is I was actually a Division I athlete. I was a rower back in college. I went to the University of Louisville and I rowed boats. So I literally got a college scholarship, and it was really fun until it wasn't. And then I started struggling so much with my sport. I started wrestling with the idea of like, did I actually enjoy this? Did I actually like this aspect? And this is where like why sport and performance psychology translates so beautifully into the business world is like, the athlete identity my athletes had when I worked with athletics reminds me so much of the business owner identity that I absolutely know that we're going to get into, and like what a healthy identity looks like. But I really struggled with loving my sport. I started developing an eating disorder. I started developing like really unhealthy habits of I have to show up in this particular way that has been told to me, drilled into me. I had to like do all these things, and I started to hate my sport. I started to like just develop these really unhealthy thought process and actions and all these things. And if I was given access to someone like me when I was in college athletics, which later I find out actually we did have someone on staff that was not told to us, unfortunately, was not shared. That information was not shared with us, which is really sad and disheartening that like some athletes are gate kept from being able to develop a healthy relationship with their sport and whatnot. But I needed someone like me in my corner that like helped me separate my self-worth from my performance. Like I started performing poorly in my sport and I was like, I'm not a good person. Those things
Mm,
do not correlate, right? And we know this, in business, these things don't correlate. If your business has a low month, that doesn't mean you're a crappy person. They don't
mm,
correlate, right? And so I needed someone like me. And so after I graduated from my undergraduate degree, I was like, okay, I want to go into psychology, but I don't know if I want to go clinical. I don't know if I only want to go into like mental health, strict on, diagnoses and whatnot. And I was like, I want to do something else. And I discovered the world of sport and performance psychology, fell in love with it. I went to a top 4 university, Florida State University, for sport and performance psychology. Obviously, an incredible athletic school, like very well known in the athletic space and NCAA. And it was really cool to just experience working with the athletes, with the teams that I did at Florida State. And then from there, I was hired by the US Army. And that is actually what brought me from the South, from the East Coast. I grew up in Florida, brought me out to Washington State, where I live now.
mm.
And so I started working with the Army for 3 years. Again, badass population, like so cool to work with. High octave, high levels. I worked a lot with the military police, particularly a lot of like active shooter drills, a lot of like high pressure situations. How can we think clearly? How can we still, go through our process and think logically when our adrenaline is through the roof, our heart is racing, we are sweating, there's potentially a gun pointed at us. How do we handle this? Down to also them going to their promotion boards and them understanding when someone is asking you, some, general is asking you a really scary question and you're a private, how do you handle this? How do you answer clearly? How do you think clearly when your pay, your hours, your promotion depends on the answers that you're given? So I worked with them for 3 years. And then I was like, you know what? So cool. Not my people. And I paired with a business coach actually. And I was like, hey, I really want to do a retreat. I really want to do mental performance coaching, but I want to work with business owners. And I think this would be really cool. And you seem like a cool person. So her and I paired up. We ran, which I now run solo every single year, the Baja Business Retreat. So I paired with a business coach originally, and she introduced me to so many business owners. And I was like, oh my gosh, all these problems that these women are having are the
Yeah.
exact same problems that all my athletes were having and all my soldiers were having. And I was like, I knew it was going to translate, but I was like, this is so easy to translate these skills into the business world. And so, like, that's kind of how I got started. And that Baja was the big realization of my shift and my pivot within my own business. My company came out of it because of that, a rebrand, and True Adventure Collective was born. And ever since, I've been working with female entrepreneurs, and I've only been working with female entrepreneurs, and it's been a freaking dream to work with them. So that's who
And
I am and how I
now
got into it. Yeah.
now you guys can understand why I was so excited to have her on, because it was that, and you know what the other thing that got me was, and there's just so much that I wanna unpack from that, was you and your summits, which I feel
Yeah.
like is not something you see every day on
Yeah.
Instagram, not to
Mhm.
mention the type of work you do in connection to that. So, like, has that and you enjoying that been part of this process for you? Did that kind of work into this, or was that something totally separate?
Yeah. So I've always been outdoorsy, and I think like it's I'm like very extreme. I do know that I'm like I undeniably like a very extreme sport oriented person.
Mm.
And I know that like the sports I do. So for anyone who has not been on my Instagram or has not seen these things, I ski. I also backcountry ski. So that means that I ski out of bounds. That means I wear like an avalanche transceiver, what's called a beacon. So like if an avalanche happens, because we're not surrounded by ski patrol, like my friends can find me if I'm buried under the snow. I go out and I mountaineer and we rope up and we wear crampons, the big spiky things on our feet, and we are roped together so that way if someone falls into a hole in an ice like
Mhm.
crack essentially in these mountains on these glaciers. And in Washington State, there's volcanoes. We're not worried about the lava part of volcanoes in Washington because it's cold, which is great. But we are worried about the ice part. So like if you fall in, ropes help you get them out and stay attached and stay alive. And obviously I've worked many, many years to reach this level. And
Mhm.
absolutely, I think it has been a huge aid in me becoming the coach that I am, because I not only see this development in business, but I see these like mindset changes over my own personal athletic career
Yeah.
from doing a more traditional sport. It's not like, baseball or softball or anything like that, but like rowing, still a like more traditional sport. It's in college athletics, to literally like summiting mountains that I used to think I did a personal post on this on my personal page. And I used to literally only think that like Red Bull athletes would do the sports that I do. And now I'm like, all my friends do this. I've like surrounded myself with a community where like, to
Yeah.
me, this is normal, which really plays into it matters who you surround yourself with. Because
Mhm.
for me, mountaineering and backcountry skiing and summiting mountains is truly a Tuesday for me. Like
Yeah.
my friends and I text each other like Thursday night and we're like, yo, what summit you want to do in 2 days?
Well, the reason I think it's important is because, at least for me, my thought process is anytime I'm taking advice, and this has always been how it is in any bucket. It can be about relationships, it could be about business, it could be about, mental performance. You wanna take it from someone who lives and embodies that at the deepest level. And
Yeah.
so the thing that I found, kind of to my point earlier about trying to really find someone who was a great candidate to speak to this, there was a lot of theory around high performance and what that looks like and mental performance, but there wasn't as much of the behavior matching the discussion. And one of the
Mm.
things that I was like, okay, her, as soon as I saw your stuff, was I really was so insanely inspired by not just what you were teaching and all of the things that but also the fact that you really live and embody these principles every single day. And I think that that's a really important thing for anyone getting advice from anyone on how they can start to integrate that. And
Mhm.
so, like, you had noted when you were explaining kind of and going through your bio, which I like instantly, I'm like ping 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 in my head is going off, of you just kind of fell out of love with your sport. And I think that
Mhm.
that's something that really is 1,000%, I'm sure you see this with clients as well, transferable to business, because there's so many times that I've seen people who've either fallen out of love with maybe their entire business. It could be with just a section of their business. It could be out of just an area or behavior or something that they're taking action on every single day.
Mhm.
But then you start to wonder, is this business truly not for me? Or is it just the experience that I'm giving myself within that? And so I'm curious, when you were talking about not enjoying necessarily your sport, or for those who are not enjoying their business,
Mhm.
and that tied to identity, because I think
Yeah.
that there's a big correlation there. So I'm curious if you could speak to, for the person who feels like they're not loving their business right now,
Mhm.
how do they start to kind of like unpack that?
I think so. Here's some theory. Obviously, like I am a big advocate for research and like you have to use science. Like I paid too much money for a master's degree to not use science.
Mm,
And like I love being able to use personal experiences and like, to the people that build their business or, become advice people or mentors or whatever based on their own experience, take that with a grain of salt. But when you can come from actual science and theory and proven facts based on populations and sample sizes and all the things, that like research comes down to, and why like my field I think is so cool, and why mental performance is so cool, is there is science behind it. There are people that literally sit behind the desk and are like, oh, I'm going to like study these athletes or study these nurses or study these people and find patterns, and we can learn from this. So if you are struggling with loving your business, one thing that I would love for you to look up is this thing called the AIMS, AIMS, Athlete Identity Measurement Scale, I think. I'm pretty sure the S is a scale.
question mark? Yeah.
Question mark. But definitely if you do like AIMS, AIMS, and then type in like athlete identity, I'm sure it'll pop up. There's like essentially it breaks down to like 7 criteria. And I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but like when you go through this, just replace athlete, replace sport with like business. And it like this, I use this with my business owners. I've like had them check in when they start getting like really stressed, when they start feeling like they don't have enough time, when they start feeling overwhelmed, or like, I, don't love my business. I think I want to quit. And ask yourself, like, do you have a healthy identity? Do you enjoy this aspect? Is this something that you like want to keep doing? Or is this something that like you fill your time, or it's become a check the box? One of the big things that I realized in my sport, and I think this can translate so well to business, is when I actually left college athletics early. I quit after 2 years. So I didn't finish my career. I actually quit, I think a week, 2 weeks before our championship, which is,
Wow.
yeah, that was crazy. It was literally insane for me to do that. I, looking back, make better choices, 19-year-old Karina or 20-year-old Karina, because I definitely left my team a little high and dry. In the long run,
Mm.
it was best for me. That is absolutely was the best decision for me. Wasn't the best decision for the team, but you know what? Like my coach was signed my release papers, which sounds really crazy that like a coach has to like literally sign like she can leave the team.
Yeah.
But I was like on scholarship. So anyway, so I left early and I was like, I'm never going to row again. Everything's terrible. I hate rowing. Like it developed such a crappy side of me, crappy attitude. I like, it sucks. No. Finish out college. And then I went to Florida State for my master's program. And then I was like, there's a high school team around here. Let me just like, turns out one of my high school competitors who used to row for a different team was the head coach for the local high school team where I was going to grad school. And I was like, hey, I just want to come out in the water with you. And he was like, jump in a boat. Let's go. Like, come out on the launch, which is what the like motorized coaching boats are called, launches. And I went out and I was like, oh my gosh, this sport's so fun. I was like, this is so cool. I was like, why did I leave? This is a great sport. Obviously, I was a coach in a coaching
Right.
position, not in a like physical,
Yeah.
sport position. But I was like, why did I have that such a big shift? Like, obviously there's an aspect to it that like, yeah, I'm no longer doing the work. Like I'm no longer physically doing the like gritty, hard part. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I'm like, why did I hate it so much? And then now I'm like, oh, I can't imagine my life without it. Like I truly looking back, I can't imagine my life without college
Mm.
athletics and high school athletics and like coaching this team. And then I ended up continuing so much that I coached a US national team in Boston after I graduated. Like
Wow.
I was like, I'm back in. I love rowing. And the reason it was is because I was tying so much of my identity when I was in college, when I was in athletics, to the sport. I was living, breathing the sport, which sounds like what you should do. But if you make your entire life about one thing, what happens when that one thing disappears? And the reality is like, there are so many, and athletes are such an easy way, and we feel it as business owners to live and breathe our business, that we're like, all we do is think about it. And then we have to
Mm.
be careful if we only surround ourselves with other entrepreneurs, as great as that is, be in those rooms, but you also have to be in rooms with 9 to 5ers.
Mhm.
You also have to be in rooms with blue collar workers or labor workers, or if are a labor worker, with knowledge workers. Like you cannot silo yourself. And that's what I did when I was in college. I lived with rowers. All we talked about was rowing. All we did
Mm.
was rowing. And when I was doing other things, I was shamed for doing these other things. I was in a sorority, and my head coach, my teammates were all like, you need to quit. It's terrible for you. And then all my sorority sisters were like, we love that you're in athletics. You're so great. This is so cool. You have so many other like hobbies. And like my rowers were like, you should only row. And then I felt
Mm.
like a bad teammate when I wanted to go be the sorority girl. And it just showed. And it is kind of funny because like after I quit, I'm not friends with the rowers anymore, but I'm friends with the sorority girls still, because like
Interesting.
they were the ones that were supportive of like, be in these different areas. And the same thing needs to happen in your business, is like, if you're falling out of love, you might literally be like in a silo of your business. You need
Mhm.
to do something else. Find another hobby. And that's why I now at this point I have to summit. I'm like,
Yeah.
these mountains are what keeps me sane in my business. If I only did business, I would probably fall out of love, just like I did in college athletics. Like,
Well, I think people try I've talked about this on other shows too, like, I lost myself in my business when I was first growing it. And I just as a quick question, mental performance versus high performance, if you were to quickly define the difference to you, or is it the same in your opinion?
I think it's the same. I think you can't be a high performing person without having a high performing mental state. I
Okay.
think like your brain needs to be trained just as much as your body. And I think a lot of us knowledge workers that are like in the 21st century, that we are no longer doing labor necessarily. If you are like, cool, keep doing it. But a lot of like knowledge workers, we need to work our brain and we don't think about it. It's not taught to us to work our
Mm,
brain and develop confidence, and that confidence is a skill, that public speaking is a skill, asking questions is a skill, just as running or lifting or
mhm.
rowing or swimming or any of our sports that we do, pickleball, like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, but it's all developed.
Yeah.
you
I
know
I ask because I know as we say it, people are gonna be like, "Is it the same
is
thing?
it the
Does it
same thing?
kinda"
Yeah.
yeah, I so just
Hmm.
if anyone is curious, I resonate with the aspect for sure of, really what I'm getting from that and what's kind of clicking for me is dimension. Because for me, even there was a season where I really was like, "I don't even know if I'm cut out for this." Like, I don't think that I thought I love it, but then I got to a certain place and it just became everything that I once loved about it didn't feel like it brought me joy anymore.
Hmm.
And I remember someone had taken me through an exercise and they were still like, "Who are you outside of your business?" And I was like, "What do you mean? I don't get it." And they're like, "Well, like, if you couldn't describe who you are and like what you enjoy and it couldn't have anything connected to your business, what would that be?" And like previously my answers might have been, well, like I love making content and I love being, in there with my team and I love, getting on with my clients, but everything was in that business bucket.
Hmm.
And I think what ended up happening, exactly to your point, was as soon as there became any aspect of friction or any aspect of like, even when things were going well, but even most importantly, when things were not going well, or you had a little blip in whatever was going on in the business, it felt like there was so much pressure on this to not only fix itself for the business, but also fix itself so it can bring you joy again because you
Yeah.
felt lost if it didn't feel perfectly in synergy.
Hmm.
And one of the things that was a really helpful tool around that was the aspect which was passed on to me from a mentor was that you have to earn the right to touch your business. So like so many people as part of, getting themselves in a peak state of performance each day, think about things still in the business buckets. Like wake up, read a book, listen to a business podcast. Like it's very even when we think about things like morning routines or rituals or any of those things, there's still so much in the business bucket. And so I'm
Hmm.
curious for someone like those that you've worked with that are really trying to tap into that like really peak performance, how much of that would you say is diving into the area of maybe their sport or their business, and how much is that is maybe finding themselves outside of it that as a domino impacts
I
their business or sport?
I truly think honing a skill outside of business is almost more valuable than being better at business,
Mm,
because I think that there's so many things that can translate from doing something else. And it doesn't have to be summiting mountains or mountaineering or, college athletics. Like you can go play pickleball. Like I use that. I think it's funny because like pickleball is like a funny sport, honestly.
yeah.
Like I think everybody can agree that we go out on the court for the first time and we're like, this is a joke. And then we're like, wait, this is actually really fun. Like, but what I tell my clients all the time and what I used to tell my athletes, and like it's kind of reverse. Like my business owners, I'm like, go pick up a sport. And my athletes, I'm like, go pick
Mm,
up something that's not a sport. Like I'm like, do
mm,
something else.
yep.
Like literally anything else. But for my business owners, honing a skill outside of it, I think can directly translate. And an example is one of my friends, one of my business friends. She's a copywriter and she's been a client of mine for a couple years now. She's gone on a couple of my retreats and she's a copywriter. And we went surfing. Just, she had never gone surfing before. She was a college softball player. So she's
Mm,
very athletic, very, gritty type of, person. And she went into surfing and she was like, I'm an athlete. If I can play college softball, who's to say I can't be a surfer?
Yeah.
And the thing is that mentality can translate into business so easily. If you can win on a pickleball court, who's to say you can't win on a sales call?
Mm.
If you can stand up on a surfboard, who's to say that you can't tackle being a podcast, host for the first time? Like, who's to say these things don't directly correlate? And the more that I realized, and this is from my own personal experience, and I can probably find research on this, but I don't have anything off the top of my head. So I'm going to just say
Mm.
this is like Karina's experience. The better I get at my sports, the more badass I feel. And
Mhm.
I walk into a room, a business room, a networking event, a sales call. And whether the people in the room know that I just like got off a volcano summit or not, I stand and I'm like, I just got off a volcano summit.
Yeah.
I'm amazing. I can do anything, and like, again, it doesn't have to be a volcano summit. It can be like, I won this recreational pickleball tournament and like had fun doing it and
Yeah.
enjoyed the process. Translate that into business, right? And so much of our business, we like grit our teeth and are like, everything has to work and everything has to be perfect. Imagine going onto a pickleball court and having that same mentality. No one will want to play with you and you're not going to win. You are
Yeah.
not going to win. The
Yeah.
people who win at pickleball, the people who win the Olympics are having fun. And
Mm.
I think like truly, I tell my business owners all the time that like, if you don't have a hobby that turns off the business brain, you just have a waste of your time. Like you need a
You're
hobby.
waiting. You're
You're
waiting until you get to touch the
yes.
business again. Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
that's such a good way of like
Yeah.
saying that.
Well, I think there's a big difference between people filling their time and being
Mhm.
fulfilled with their time.
Yeah.
To me, there's, yeah, I'm gonna for the rest of the evening watch Netflix, do this. And again, nothing against Netflix, but it's just that you're
Right.
gonna basically do things that allow you to keep busy till the next day at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. when you open your laptop again,
Mhm.
versus being excited to close your laptop to go live the other portion of your life. And I
Yeah.
loved what you shared about transferring of what you're doing outside of business and how it correlates to business, because I have seen this with like the top entrepreneurs that I know and the top peers that are multiple 7 and 8 figure earners. Their clarity of what they do in their business oftentimes happens in like the sauna, or it'll be like in a random, hey, I was on a jog or I was hiking and I
Mhm.
realized I'm going to make XYZ offer. And that's because a lot of that, the clarity and frankly the mental peace and the tuning into yourself often doesn't happen in a Google Doc the way
Yeah.
that people force it to. And
Mhm.
like you're talking about with sports and team or anything, like I'm thinking even for yourself with doing summits, like there are so many transferable skills that just even off the top of my head of, consistency and taking time for yourself to be able to heal with the physical pressure on your body, i.e.
Mm.
prioritizing yourself and self-care, looking at the aspect of like feeling like you can't go any further and your body's like, nope, I'm capped out, and then still going further after that point, all that confidence that you're building in that to do the hard thing, 1,000% is transferable to business. And so for me, it's really just collecting evidence, is what I think about it as
Yes.
mentally, right? So that evidence sometimes, yes, can happen in business. But if you can collect it in other areas outside of business, you can transfer that over to what you're doing within your
Mhm.
day to day of what you do for work. So like I love that.
Yeah. I think it's so cool because we joke all the time about how like in your 20s people take up weird sports like marathon running and we're like why did we start doing these things? and
Yeah.
and the reality is like if you can go run 26.2 miles, like who's to say you can't sell
Good
out an
on you.
offer? Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like no one's making you do this, no one's making you run a business, no one's doing these things or like making you do them. They can translate, if you show up every day to train for 26.2, then you can do. Oh my gosh, in Canada, do you guys do marathons and
Oh,
Ks?
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it feels like everyone and their grandma's running one these days, like, it's all over. It's
I
all
love it.
over.
I love it. I love it.
Well, I was
That's so funny.
curious, like, with the mental performance and the high performance, because
Mhm.
I think something that I I love to unpack is like you mentioned earlier around the psychology piece and how important that is to you, which by the way, I love. Like I always love, I'm a nerd for anything that's backed by any aspect of data.
Yeah.
For you, in helping different entrepreneurs with this type of work, how much of this is psychology and how much of this is because, earlier you had mentioned the difference between, high performance and the classic things we typically see online when it's talked about, right? Of like what it
Mhm.
means of like waking up at a certain hour, having certain routines.
Yeah.
How much of this is routine and how much of this is really mental, i.e., who you are, not what you're doing?
Mm. I think it's a really good balance. I think you have to have both, absolutely. But I think in order to do the things, in order to what you're doing to have an effect, you have to be who you are, like be the high
Mm,
performer. I think like there is a big difference in those that act in order to be, they are not successful. Those that
mm.
be, therefore act, those are the successful ones. And
So
for
good.
anyone who's like, those were the same words, I don't understand. Essentially,
I was literally just gonna say, please repeat that because
yeah.
guys, what she just said was absolute gold when it comes to identity in any bucket as an entrepreneur. So if you don't
Yeah.
mind to repeat that,
Yeah,
that would be
absolutely.
amazing.
So it's if I can say the exact same thing. It's essentially like those who act in order to become are not going to be successful. Those are the people that are like the only way that I'm going to become a millionaire is like the one day when I have $1 million in my bank account. Those people are going to just be like striving and striving and striving and always falling short and always feeling down and always like, well, I'm not a millionaire yet. Like I'm not a successful entrepreneur yet because like I don't have the thing yet. And here's the thing and why like there's real science behind manifestation. There's real science behind goal setting. And if you don't set goals, if you don't visualize, if you don't look at, your future, if you don't create this vision of you and make it so crystal clear that you're like, this is who I am, then you're missing out on such an easy part of becoming the successful entrepreneur, becoming the millionaire, becoming the person that you want. So instead of act in order to be, you want to be, therefore you act, right?
Mm,
And like the be, therefore you act is stepping into this identity of, I am $1 million earner. What is $1 million earner? If in your brain, $1 million earner gets up at 6 a.m., then get up at 6 a.m. It's be, therefore I do, right? If $1 million earner to you gets up at 8 a.m. and starts work at 9:30, wake up at 8 a.m., start work at 9:30. If
mhm.
$1 million earner to you gets up, has a slow morning, goes to the gym, and doesn't start work until 11 a.m., then do it. Right? It's you have to understand, you have to step into being $1 million earner before you're $1 million earner. Otherwise, you will not
Mm,
become $1 million earner. So it's like you kind of have to like, it's starting from the inside out. If you begin thinking, and this is where like the like woo-woo of manifestation really, really step into, what does this look like for me? Like make the things that work for you. If vision board is it, make the vision board. If a to-do list is it, if a list of qualities is it, if it's a written out schedule of what my dream CEO day looks like, when I earn $1 million, this is what it's going to look like. Why are you not doing that now? Why are you waiting to make $1 million to make that schedule? That just is silly, right? The Olympic gold medalist isn't an Olympic gold medalist the day that they win the Olympics. They become an Olympic gold medalist at the gym every day, on the track every day, showing up for practice. Michael Phelps didn't become the most winningest. Actually, I don't know if he is anymore, but once he was. I actually think some of the skiers might have passed him, like Lindsey Vaughn might have passed him. But like Michael, we all know who that is, right? Like Michael Phelps didn't become the most winningest gold medal Olympic athlete in the pool at the Olympics. He did it every day, showing up at his home pool, his home gym, his
mm.
home kitchen. That's where he became the Olympic medalist. So, why are you waiting for your $1 million, your gold medal? Don't wait for that to become the millionaire. and the
Mm.
successful entrepreneur. You have to be it now. And then the $1 million will come. The gold was always going to hit Michael Phelps. If he kept showing up in the pool, he
Yeah.
was always going to be the most winningest Olympian in history at that time,
And I
right?
think it's probably one of the most frustrating for most people who, let's just say, wanna hit $1 million business is some of the most frustrating advice. Was like, "No, it has to be a
It,
strategy, and it has to be a marketing thing, and it
oh,
has to be sales."
yeah.
And I'm like, "What if I told you we're all using the same platform? Like, what if I told you we're all selling high ticket offers or whatever it might be?" And I
Hmm.
think while it's, for me, empowering, it depends on how you look at it. Because if you are somebody who's like, "But I don't understand, I want it to be a strategy," it's often in the avoidance of the work that actually needs to be done, which, to be
Hmm.
honest, when you distill it down, is within yourself. And I love that example of athletes, because, like, for me, even for a mentor that shared it with me, they were like, Tom Brady isn't the way he is on the field. He
Hmm.
trains the rest of the year just as hard to be able to perform for that game. And so I think, kind of back to your point, when it comes to, like, do we need more business strategy? You're asking, like, what about the play on the field, though? The play on the field. And it's like, yes, can there be refinement and optimization
Yeah.
there along the way?
Hmm.
For sure. But the reality is, one of the best analogies that was given to me is, like, if you give the playbook of Tom Brady to a different player, you're going to get a totally different outcome. And that's because it's not about the
Yeah.
playbook, it's about the player that has that and them knowing what to do with it.
If it was about the playbook, the Bucks wouldn't have won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady because they are a completely different playbook.
Right.
Tom Brady is the secret sauce, and he came in and made the Bucks a Super Bowl champion.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
absolutely. Hmm.
And so, like, to your piece of, like, okay, so now someone's like, all right, I get it. I need to be the player. Where do I start? Because I think there's a lot of, and I feel like you probably would agree with this, as I've done all the research in the back end of all of your things. There's a lot of competing information, right? Like, there's just
So
like,
much.
you need this, you need to manifest, you need to journal, but also make sure you have a stillness practice, make sure you do breath work, make sure you meditate. And you're like, amazing. Like, I have a part-time job, like,
Yeah.
on
My
top of whatever.
self-care, yeah, my self-care is 40 hours a week. Like,
Yeah. So I think it can feel very overwhelming. It can feel very confusing because there's just so many things you could do. So you don't know what you should do as, like, the
mhm,
step to really becoming that person. And I so agree with you. You have to really embody who you want to be before you ever become it. And, one of the exercises that we do with a lot of clients is we'll ask them to compare who they are today versus the values of the individual that they want to become.
mm,
And, for me, kind of to my point earlier, my values used to be, after a hard day, I would sit down, have a glass of wine, and watch Netflix. And I'm like, but if I want to have a massive business, that's probably not how I'm, like, quote unquote, filling my cup each day
mhm.
when I'm that person. So start to embody that now.
Yeah.
If someone has this awareness, they need to be a better player if they want to have that vision of the business they're going for. What kinds of areas do they need to start to dive into to really develop that identity?
Yeah. I think the number one thing, and obviously I will stand on a high horse all day about this. I will stand on a soapbox all day about this. Everyone can obviously have their own opinion about this, but I truly believe that your mind cannot be a high performer if your body is not. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to, like, have a six pack and go run marathons. Absolutely not, because I don't have a six pack and I've never run a marathon. But I do think that you have to have some sort of physical exertion, some sort of physical practice of something. It can be yoga, it can be walking, it can be running, it can be summiting, anything. But the whole thing, your entity of who you are, can be broken down into your brain and your body, right? We all have felt mentally drained in, like, a good way. Like, we're going to come from, like, not as stress and overwhelm way, but, like, we've gotten to the end of a day where we're like, "Oh my god, my brain, that's it. I left it all on the table. I'm
Mhm,
exhausted. I can't do it." But you know what you can do is, like, go to the gym and you're like, "I actually feel really great," because your brain was
mhm,
worked that hard. And now you can turn your brain off and just go lift heavy weights, or you can go climbing, or you can go walking, and you're like, "Actually, I feel really good here." They counter each other. And I always think that, like, whenever your brain is exhausted, if at the end of my client days, whenever I'm done coaching, I have to work out. And like some people are like, oh, and that's when you rest. And I'm like, no,
Mm,
that's when I put physical stress on my body, right?
yes.
Mental stress has already been done. Like I coached, I gave it all to my clients. I sat on Zoom for the 3 hours and I just coached and I took every brain cell possible and gave it to them. And then I go into, personally, my thing is I walk into the climbing gym and my brain gets to turn off. And
Mhm.
I just have to like muscle myself through things. I'm problem solving in a different way. So I'm using my brain in a different way, but I'm not solving business life problems, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so I think that like we need to have that like counterbalance of one another. And I think that is such a big thing that not everybody does when it comes to self care. Another analogy that I'm a queen of analogies. I
Oh, same.
love analogies.
Same.
The like viral thing of like, we live in a world where we can put our vodka sauce on any type of pasta. You won't believe how many clients sent me that. And they were like, this is you. And I'm like, yep, sure is. One analogy that someone said, I think I heard it on a podcast, is there's a big difference. Imagine your energy, brain power, physical, it doesn't matter.
Mm,
Your energy is like a bathtub. And you have to figure out when it comes to draining, like you're draining throughout a day. You're the plug at the bottom is unplugged. Like you are draining, you are working, you are physically running, you are doing whatever it is, you're draining. There is a difference in action between plugging and stopping the draining, and that's rest, and turning on the water to fill your water back up, and that's recovery.
mm,
There is a big difference. And your Netflix and wine is your rest. You
mhm,
stopped. You
mhm,
stopped the water from draining. You're not working anymore. Water is not coming out of the bathtub, but you're not filling it back up. But
mm.
I guarantee whatever your physical thing or your friends or the people that you love or the thing that, we've all heard the like fills your cup is the recovery. That's what's actually going to give you the energy again, give you the water back into your bathtub to fill it back up. You need both. You need to plug it because if we turn on the faucet and the plug
Yep.
is not in, it's useless. But first we stop it and maybe we pause and we watch an episode on Netflix. We pour ourselves a glass of wine,
Mhm.
but then we go and hang out with our friends who pour back into us, or we go on our walk and listen to birds and we're like, oh yeah, like this is it. Like this brings me back.
Yeah.
We need both. We need to balance and you have to figure out what each of them are for you. I would
Mhm.
love to be able to be like, this is
Percentage.
this percentage. Like, this is what you can do. This is, if
Yeah.
everybody goes on a mental health walk, you will be recovered. But some people hate walking and they'd rather go run a marathon. Then go run a
Mhm.
marathon. Do it. Not me. I don't
Well,
want to do that.
I was gonna say, actually one of the things that I kind of joke about other people, it's not a joke, but I joke with them about it. It's about me, so it's fine. They always say to me, like, you just need to sit down. You just need to just rest, just relax. And I'm like, to do what? They're like,
To
watch
do,
TV. Like, you're always on the go, 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 go. You just gotta sit down. And what I realized was and I just love that analogy because I think for me, I can do the Netflix and wine for like a movie, maybe just have one of those Sundays where you're binging Yellowstone. But other than that, once I'm done with that, I gotta go because I'm
I
like,
got
I
to
gotta
do
go do
something.
something. I
Mhm.
feel like my body becomes, I feel worse more than I feel better. And so I love the aspect of one of the pieces to kind of training for mental performance is really having that connection between understanding the distinction between mental practices and physical practices
Yes.
because you're 100% spot on. Like I walk 5k in the morning and 5k at night, and for me it really is the setting of intention before diving into the day and then the release at the end of the day, and it's just this
Mhm.
constant routine. And it's, to be honest, I think also, again, kind of back to performance, the interesting part that's also been a relationship navigation for me is the aspect of completion or achievement. Because I'm sure, even for you with summits, there's a portion of that that is like, I did it and I achieved it,
Yeah.
right?
We
But
have
there's
ego.
also,
Like, that's okay.
yeah,
Mhm.
but there's also this other aspect of like, but do you love the process? And so I think there's also that duality of when you have certain practices, also asking yourself, am I just doing the practice for me, for example, it was like, okay, like I want to walk 10 kilometers a day.
Mhm.
Am I doing that because I'm going for the 10K, or am I doing it because, to your point, I like to listen to the birds and like how I feel after the movement? And so
Mhm.
I think also keeping in mind both those buckets and whatever that, regimen's going to be for you is important. So we've got that, distinction between the mental and the physical. And so, say someone's like, okay, like I'm going to basically get a kind of mental tuning in with myself practice, a physical tuning in practice. The other thing I love that you touch on with clients is emotional regulation.
Mm, mhm.
Because one thing that I will say is that I think there's a common denominator amongst people who are trying to perform in their business, that they don't realize that their perception of the problem is the difference between their experience of said problem.
Mhm.
So, when even you were talking earlier about helping people in really intense crisis situations to be able to perform, and again, maybe it's not as serious as a shooter in business 9 times out of 10, but it's something that, feels in our body like a crisis. It feels like,
Yeah.
whether it's a client situation, a money, a sales situation, financially up against it, whatever it might be,
Mhm.
in those moments, it feels so intense. And I
Yeah.
think what, in my opinion, has been a massive tool for me is having emotional regulation as one of the core things that have helped me to quote unquote perform. Because without those, I think about old me, something used to take me under for like 3 days, sometimes 7 days over this thing that
Mhm.
I was ruminating on, or I couldn't problem solve because I literally couldn't see through the glasses. It was just fog of emotion. And so I know you also talk about emotional regulation with people. And so I'm curious, for mental performance in those states of crisis or in points in your business of resistance, how does emotional regulation come into mental performance?
I think it's everything. I think to your point of without it, it is foggy and unclear where you're going, how to get down, how to come back, how to keep going. A story that I would love to share is a time that like I almost didn't have it together and I realized like what to do in those moments. Something in my business when I was baby business, like first 6 months, first year, whenever I would hear a no, it would be a knockout punch. I would be like, I'm never
Mm.
going anywhere. I can't do this. Every time that I would hear a no. And my business coach was always like, you got like keep going. And I would keep going. I would eventually get myself up. I'm never like I will never lay down. I know that's not in me, but at the beginning, I would lay down for a long time, like not physically, but like internally.
Yeah.
Imagine just honestly, maybe
I'm just
I
like
did
seeing you picture.
just like on the kitchen floor, like client says no, and I just immediately melt onto the floor. I'm like, and I'm done.
I'm done.
Which I probably have done, honestly, I think all of us have melted onto a floor and have been like, life is over. I can't do anything. But the more no's you hear, the more rejections that happen, the more
Mm.
shit that hits the fan, the more you like become like, you know what? It's a part of business. This is what happens. And I think I used to like literally 6 months ago, I still had this like, if I just turn off my emotions, and that's literally what would happen in my brain. I'd be like, I'm just like going to be disconnected from the results. I can
Mm.
get through life faster. I can get through the rejection faster. And that doesn't work. Let me tell you from personal experience, because you do need to feel these things. And like, if you don't feel them, the bigger your business gets, the bigger the rejections are going to get, the
Mm.
bigger, like the things are going to get. Maybe your high ticket offer right now is $2,000, but come the day when your high ticket offer is $20,000, that no is going to feel so much heavier. And if you don't
Yeah.
deal with $2,000, $20,000, it used to be your annual salary. Like,
Mhm.
shit, man. So something that happened this last summer that made me really realize how much you need to like move through the emotion was actually like, I feel like, again, I learned so much in my like physical sports that translates to my business so well. And I'm still working on it. And I'm going to tell this story because I know that the person that this story involves will never listen to this podcast, to be completely honest. But I was going for, and if she does, she knows what, she obviously was there. So like she knows that this happened. We were going to summit Mount Rainier, which is the tallest peak in Washington state. It is 14,421 feet, which I can't quick math to meters, but it's like,
It's tall.
it's tall.
Yeah.
It's the fifth.
That's all we need to know.
That's all
It
we
is
need to know.
tall.
It is the fifth tallest in the continental United States. So in like the greater United States, not including Alaska. Alaska has like 10 peaks that are like above this, but in the typical US that you see, domestic US, it is the fifth tallest mountain. There are glaciers, you have to be roped up for this. It's like most people do it in 2 or 3 days. Like it's a trek. You train for it. We carry about 65 pounds worth of gear, which is like 32 something kilograms of gear up on our back to get up there. And we spend the night at base camp. So you come to a base camp. Typically people do it in 2 days. So we start hiking at like 9 a.m. We get to our base camp at like 7 p.m. We go to bed for about 3 hours. We wake up at like 10:30, 11 p.m. And it's like, it's summer. So it's actually still light out, which is crazy. And at like 11:30, we're like, all right, geared up, ready to go. And we start hiking at midnight. It's me and 2 of my friends. So we're an all women's rope team and we're going up. It was the hardest thing that I had to do up until like that point in my life. And the 3 of us were going up. I was the third man on the team. You put the most experienced person in the front, you put the second most experienced person in the back, and then the least experienced in the middle. So I was the second most experienced person on the team. And we had our leader and she was going forward and we were crossing glacier and we were roped up, and we were crossing crevasses, which you don't know what that is. They're like cracks in the snow and things were getting a little dicey, a little scary. We were crossing snow bridges over like these crevasses that we can't see the bottom of. And like if someone falls in, like we have to figure out how to get them out kind of thing. And like, people do die on this route. Like this does happen. It's a scary thing. And we're walking up and I'm having the time of my life. Like I am at a high. I am literally in the back, literally singing as I'm hiking up. And the person in the middle had just she's like literally on antibiotics. She just had like a viral infection and she's like dying. She's like, everything is terrible. I can't do this. And I'm like, we're going to go summit. We're going to go summit. I'm like having the time of my life. And then we get to the first snow bridge and we cross it and we get to the next snow bridge and we realize like how dicey this is getting. And the girl is also scared of heights and that fear just overflowed. And she looked at what we had to cross and she realized like she physically could not cross. And the thing about this glacier travel is everyone's a yes or it's a no. Like you can't just be like, oh, it's fine. And also like males do this. We're not males. We're smarter than males. We make good decisions. Okay. And if someone says no, we're not like, yeah, it'll be fine. Just like, let's go. Like, that's how people die.
Yeah.
And it actually, there is science behind like women make smarter decisions in the mountains because like we evaluate everything better, which is really hilarious to like talk to men about. And they're like, we make good decisions.
It's science, you guys.
And I'm like, no, actually it's science. There's studies. And if you look at like the people who die in avalanches, they more than often than not are all male teams rather than if they have one female, the likelihood of a catastrophic event happen decreases by like some crazy amount. I'm not going to say a stat because I don't know it off the top of my head, but like it's a crazy amount. Anyway, she gets scared. And in the moment, I walked up to where we were making our decision and I had this gut feeling. I was like, we're not summiting. I was like, we're going to turn here. Like she's scared. She's done. She's tapping out. And I had a choice in that moment to be mad and to feel as though she ripped away something that I had been working for, something that I've been training on. And like in our trio, my physical fitness sucks the most. Like they are pure muscle. And I had to train so much to keep up with them. And I did such a great job. I pat myself on the back. I kept up with them and I did so much to do that. And so I had a choice that I could be so mad about like, I did everything right and I don't get to summit. Or I can be a good friend to this person who's in front of me, quite literally crying because she knew that we were turning because of her fear. And in that moment, I chose to be the good friend. And I've heard many stories where people don't handle the situations that way. And I chose to have different emotions than what's the easy emotion, which is anger. And I comforted her, and we turned, and when we spaced back out to let our ropes go, so we have about 30 feet, 10 meters between us, I started crying. I literally cried on my way down. I actually don't know if she knows that part, but I started crying on my way down of I lost the summit. I at this point I had summited all the other volcanoes that I had done on the first try. And this was my first volcano that I attempted, and I didn't summit on the first try. And I cried. And I also there had another choice of like, do I just like suck it up and like, you know what, get over it, Karina, you didn't summit,
Mhm.
or let yourself be sad, grieve, be sad. You didn't summit. Like, that's okay. You didn't reach the goal that you did or that you set out to, whether it's $500,000 in revenue, it's hire a new employee. If you didn't reach it, be sad. It's okay. Because you know what? If you're not sad, that would build resentment in
Yeah.
of whatever it is that's, you believe stopped you. And if I let that happen, I would never do anything with that particular person again. I'd be like, she ruined everything for me.
Mm.
She's one of my best friends. And like, I will continue to climb mountains with her, and I will continue to make decisions. And there's going to be one day where she's going to turn because of me
Mhm.
and because of some reason. And that's what we're building in your business is the same way. If you do not actively choose, because all the emotions are going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
There anger, I felt anger. I absolutely had a moment of like, are you effing kidding me right now? And then I decided that now's not the time. I can feel anger on my own. But right now, my closest friend is crying in front of me because we're not
Mm.
going to summit, and she knows it's because of her. And I'm going to choose to not feel angry in this moment. I'll feel angry another time. And the
Mm.
same thing needs to happen in your business. You need to feel all of the emotions, but you can't just like grit it and bear it and be, like suck it up, push it down,
Yeah.
turn it off. It's not going to work. It's going to bubble up, and everything, your head's going to explode one day, and it's going to be terrible. Versus if you just let yourself cry and scream, set a timer, go, and
Yeah.
and then move on.
Well, it's
And
like the
then
automatic emotion we feel is something I think a lot of people don't realize you have the ability to choose. One of the
mhm,
best stats that I ever learned was like emotions are typically something that are
90
natural for
seconds.
90 seconds. After that,
Yeah.
it really only continues because of the story that you associate with it and how
Mhm,
long you ultimately are deciding, which I know is uncomfortable for people to admit, but that you're deciding to stay in that story. Like if you feel something outside of 90 seconds, it's not the feeling. The feeling has come and it has gone.
you
You
create a new thought.
decided
Yeah.
to
Mhm,
create a new thought around it or a story around it or an associated emotion and ran with that for another phase. And
mhm,
so I love that distinction between the automatic emotion versus the chosen emotion because I think it honors the natural response that comes up in us. So, for example, in that instance, the natural, emotion of anger that comes through and frustration that comes through, but then also taking a breath and being able to choose how you want to be able to show up in this moment. And that 1,000% translates to business because I think one of the things that's the hardest part, in my opinion, about a lot of business marketing and for people who are new to entrepreneurship or maybe even who've been in it for a couple years, no one talks about the hard emotion. Everyone always talks about the punches you throw and never what happens when you actually take a punch. So, like when they're training you, for example, as a boxer to be able to win in any game, the main thing that they're going to have you do in a match is not just throw, but also can you take a punch?
mhm,
And I think the unfortunate thing that I'm seeing, at least when it comes to entrepreneurs who are looking to grow and looking to develop, is they get shocked when they get hit. And they're like, "Wait, what the heck? What's this?" And it's like, I expected it to be crushing it, new milestone, everything's
mhm,
amazing. And then I think to your point around being able to mentally still show up and perform, like in that moment, you were still able to show up in the way that you intended to with the values you held to be true. To your point earlier of like, I value being a certain kind of person. So
mhm,
because of that, that's how I'm going to show up. I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that don't know how to do that because they've never had the equivalent of a punch or they've never had the equivalent of someone, in a crew of three say, "Hey, I can't go." And
mhm.
so then you're like, "But the whole time I envisioned we were gonna go up, it was gonna look like this, we weren't gonna have any issues, like, I had the whole thing set out, like, this is not supposed to happen, like, this launch is supposed to work." This offer is supposed to sell. This marketing is supposed to land. And then when it doesn't, it becomes this massive story instead of an emotion that's associated with it, and the processing of that. And then saying, to your point, as to what you did, who do I want to be in this moment? And how do I want to respond given the situation is what it is?
Yeah. That's such a great point, is like when it comes to fighting, building a business, like you can't just punch, you have to be able to take one as well.
Mm-hmm.
And preparing for that, I use the analogy, like that's a great analogy. I use the analogy of like a haunted house and being like the next person in line and not the front person, right? Like you see the zombie pop out, you see the chainsaw pop out, you know it's coming. You're still going to jump. It's still going to be scary. But if you can mentally prepare, going into business, an exercise that I use with my clients that I literally did yesterday on our coaching call actually, is having them list out all the things that they know, especially when you like start to see some success. You know, a launch is going to fail. You know that something's going to fall flat. You
Yeah.
know that like your email is going to get 0 views. You know that your Instagram reel that you spent 2 hours editing is going to get
That
10
we know for
views.
sure. That we
That
know
we
for
we
sure.
know for a fact will happen. And then the ones that you take 0
Yeah.
effort blow up and you're like, "God damn it."
Of
You
course.
know, like
Of course. Yeah.
that's just what happens, you know?
Yeah.
So like list out all those things. List out all those punches. Is it going to be a 0 revenue month? That may happen, especially in your early phases. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe there might be, if you have like bigger phases, like is there going to be a month where your income is actually lower than your expenses? That's a knockout punch. That's terrifying. What are
Mm-hmm.
you going to do next? Like, it's about standing back up. It's about getting back up there and like knowing that those punches are coming because they're coming. They are
Mm-hmm.
coming. There's not a doubt in my mind that you will feel self doubt, that you will hit a negative revenue month, that you will do something, you will make a bad investment, you will partner with the wrong business or the wrong person, shitty collaboration, like whatever it is, something will go wrong. It always goes wrong. It doesn't have to like happen all the time, but it will. And something like first that actually the mental performance coach for the US men's soccer national team, his name's Travis. And Travis said at this presentation that I just went to in October, he was like, the first thing that you have to do when shit hits the fan is turn off the fan. And I was
Mm.
like, wow, that's so profound, talking about poop hitting the ceiling fan. Um, but it's so true that like the first thing when a punch happens, when a crappy things happen, stop. Like don't just like keep it going. Like it's fine. I'll just
Yeah.
take it all. Like stop, breathe, pause, take a moment, plug your drain. You know, we can
Yeah.
go through all the analogies that you
Yeah.
want.
Whatever lands.
Whatever lands, you
Yeah.
know, like stop, assess, can we take things out of the fan? Can we fill the bathtub back up? Can we, you know, reevaluate our launch, figure out what went wrong, what happened? Can we pause? And that doesn't mean give up in the middle of a launch. Like see your launch through, do the thing all the way
Mhm.
through. Just because results aren't happening in that particular moment, maybe you need to pivot, but that doesn't mean that you need to abandon cart, you know, like
Yep.
keep it going.
There's, I think, just this distinction between who you are and what's happening. If I could really distill it down to everything, I think, whether you are, like, again, the person who's being trained in a shooting situation, if you're an Olympic athlete and you're feeling the immense amount of pressure to perform in that given moment, if you're an entrepreneur who has a sales call that you're like, I got to crush this right now because my business needs the cash flow, whatever the situation is, the only factor that you really have control over, which is again, both empowering should you choose it to be, or for some people it's overwhelming.
Slap in the face.
Yeah, is yourself. And I think that the reason I was excited to have today's conversation is I think there's a lot of belief that our external environment or the stimuli outside of ourselves is the thing that's responsible for our reality.
Mhm.
And it's a difficult pill to swallow because it means when you decide, oh no, it's actually my experience of it, my choice of the emotions, my choice of who I'm saying I'm going to be, my choice of how I spend my day and fill my energy. Am I going to plug the drain or fill up the water? Like all of the things we've talked about today are choices. And so I think
Mm.
that the most important thing that's like the underbelly of all of it is the aspect that you realize you do have a choice. You have a choice in who you are in your business. And as a result, you have a choice in how that business ultimately goes left or goes right based off of who you bring to it every single day. And so like today has just been, I feel like I'm going to go back through this whole thing and like go and rewatch. My curiosity is because I feel like, there's so much that could be done, but it's always a matter of, okay, well, like, how do we just take this and go? Because one of the things that I know, at least for myself, when I listen to podcasts is there's always like, that was so helpful, like so insightful. Oh, that landed. Anyways, and like you go
Anyway,
about
keep
your
going.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this and she's like, okay, like I feel like I really am ready to be that person. I'm ready to up the level of which I'm mentally performing in my life, in my business. What are, say, like 2 or 3 things that if you were like, if I was going to give you a prescription of what
Yeah.
I would wish for you to go do after you are done today's episode, what would those be?
The number one thing is have some sort of recreational sport. Like, like obviously this is like my bread and butter. I think it solves so many problems. That is my number one thing. It can be pickleball. It can be walking. It can be summiting. I don't give a flying patootie what it
Move your
is.
body.
Move your body.
Yeah.
You cannot be the CEO of a multi-million-dollar business without being physically healthy as well. Truly. I will die on that sword. That is the first thing. Have a physical activity because it gets your brain off. And if your physical activity doesn't turn your brain off, try a different one. We want to be like present in that physical activity. If you're thinking, if you go on walks and you listen to business podcasts, you can't do that every day. Like then pick something else. You can't, then you're thinking about business. Go rock climbing, go take a dance class, go take a yoga class where your brain truly turns off from the thing. That's when you've realized that you found the physical thing that will work for you. That's the first thing. The second thing is start small outside of business. And my business owners hate this. And I think it's so funny. I'm always like, they're like, give me a business strategy. And I'm like, yes, turn off your business. But
Yeah.
the like big thing is look for wins, look for consistency outside of your business. And whether that's showing up to the gym, whether that's I've decided to not eat out, I've decided that I'm going to wake up every day at 8 a.m. Set yourself up for success, first of all. If you are not a morning person, do not wake up at 6 a.m. You are setting yourself up for failure. I used to think a successful person wakes up at 6 a.m. until my business coach was like, you hate that. Why do you want to do that? And I was like,
I can
yeah.
attest. I did try 6, 5, 4. I tried all of it and I was like,
This is
no, I'm a
terrible.
7 a.m.
I'm
at
an
the
8 a.m.
earliest.
girly. I
Yeah.
am an 8 a.m. girly. And I
Yeah.
love staying up until like 11. Like 10
Yeah.
is where I start my bedtime routine. I'm asleep by 11. I
Yeah.
get 9 hours of sleep every night. And I'm like, this is millionaire status. Like
Yes.
it's about the
Yes.
quality for me. And I was like, 8 a.m. is when I get up. This is what I do. And so you need to figure out the win that you can be consistent on. Something that has nothing to do with business. It's waking up at a certain time. It's going to the gym at a certain time. When I worked in corporate, when I worked for the army, I wanted to save money. And I was like, I'm not going to eat out for the entire first year of working my corporate job. I was like, this is going to be the simplest thing. I will just always bring food to work. And I even bought TV dinners, like frozen dinners, just in case I like couldn't meal prep. And I was like, that's all it takes. Like it wasn't about being healthy for me. It was truly about I'm not going to spend the $15 to go to Chipotle or go to, whatever. I'll bring my shitty
TV
$6
dinner.
TV dinner to work. And I did not go out to eat. I will
Yeah.
do I did whatever it took. There were days that I would drive home because I forgot food. There were days that my company was like, we're getting lunch out. What are your orders? And I was like, I'll eat my microwaved chili. Like,
I'm good with my lean
I'm good
cuisine.
with
Thanks
my
so
lean
much.
cuisine. And what's so funny is no one at my job ever noticed it until I was like past a year. And I was like, yeah, I've been doing this. And they were like, whoa,
Yeah.
never, and that's what it is like you do it on your own. It doesn't have to do anything with business. So pick one thing to be consistent with every single day or every business day or whatever it is. Not eat out, wake up at 8 a.m., do the thing, because what you are doing is put every single day, you are putting money in the self-trust bank.
Yeah.
If I can wake up at 8 a.m. every day, or for you, 7 a.m. every single Monday through Friday, if I can do that, who's to say I can't do fill in the blank?
Mm-hmm.
So builds self-trust, is when you say you're going to do something and then you
Yep.
actually freaking do it.
Mm-hmm.
Those two things are the like simplest actions and will change your life, in your business, in your physical ability, how you look at yourself in the mirror. If you move your body and you choose one thing to be so non-negotiable, consistent, you'll solve so many of your life problems.
I honestly don't know a single wildly successful entrepreneur who doesn't have some aspect of both of those things as
Yeah,
part of their non-negotiable
non-negotiable.
rituals every day. And
Mm-hmm.
I was literally having the conversation about like the same kind of note, but in a different bucket around discipline the other day with somebody because they were saying, how do I hit these big achievements
Mm-hmm.
in business? I was like, well, it really comes down to like confidence in self. Like, do you say what you're going to do and follow through on that? And do you trust yourself? And I think there's so many times, which is why, I loved when you said earlier about the vision of who you see your successful self to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think what ends up happening is, let's just say with someone's okay, like 4 a.m. club, and you're like, well, that was not my idea. That's what they told me to do. So it doesn't fit for me, which is why I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
When you choose it and you state it and you set it as a goal and then you don't complete it, the only person you have to be responsible for and to is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I so agree with the aspect of little small ways of flexing that muscle of
Yes.
discipline because, for me, it started with when I was waking up and I tried everything. I tried all of the different hacks of like, okay, well, like Steve Jobs woke up this time. I guess I'll get up at that time. Like, I was like, who knows? I don't know. So
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to try
Try it.
everything.
Yeah, do
And
it.
none of it fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so much shame because I was like, but the books say 4 a.m. or but the book said people who are big businesses have 5 a.m. and that's when they get up. But at the end of the day, it really just depends on how many hours you're awake. I don't care what time you start. You all have the
Yeah.
same hours you're awake. So what are you doing with them? And if they go to bed at 7 and we go to bed at, 10 or 11, then great. We're all working with the same hours. So it's fine. So when I started to really figure out like what were those pieces for me, it was 7 a.m. instead of 4 a.m. And, it was trying, okay, well, like people were doing really competitive pushing type sports. And I was like, for me, going on walks and listening to a podcast, I felt like my bucket was completely filled after doing that. So I'm like, great, bake that into part of your routine.
Mm-hmm.
I tried the whole, to your point, earlier about self-care, do the red light while you meditate, then you do the breath work, then you journal. Then I'm like, I'm exhausted before I even start my day. And I realized that it really did come down to just like, what are the core practices that allow you to fill your cup every single day? And most importantly, to exactly what you noted, how consistent can you be with those? And it really isn't, in my opinion, about the steps and it's not about the alarm. And it doesn't mean anything in the sense of the fact of like what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But I love what you said about building that self trust bank because I think what ends up happening, back to your point earlier about transferable values and skills, when people don't trust themselves in business, it's because you really don't trust yourself anywhere. When you're
Yes.
not consistent in business, it's
Yes.
because you're not consistent anywhere,
Yes.
right? So there's so many things about how you live your life that are transferring into the way you do business. And it's the classic line of how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yes.
You want to be super inconsistent in every other bucket of your life, but then all of a sudden when it comes to marketing, you're going to hit the nail on the head every day. Like it's just not going to
Not gonna
happen.
happen. Yeah.
It's not
I
going to happen.
I think the other thing is like, people look at successful people and they're like, they have something, and they
Mm.
don't. They are not special. Steve Jobs is not special. Like, he hacked his way into figuring out that like it took too much brain power to pick out a new shirt every day, so he started wearing turtlenecks every single day. I have the same breakfast every single day,
Same,
literally
same.
because I'm like, I don't have to think about it. There are zero choices for my brain for the first 30 minutes of the day because I do the exact same thing every single day on a work
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
Right? And I think that when it comes to the consistency side of thing, and when it comes to developing who you want to become, people all the time look at me and they're like, you know, and I guarantee people, actually, you literally said that people look at you all the time and they're like, you're going 100 miles an hour, like you're hitting the ground running and you're always
Yeah.
going. And for us, this is normal. For me, running a business at 100 miles an hour, and then when I close my laptop, I call up my friend and we go summit a volcano. This is normal. This is a Tuesday for me. And I didn't just overnight flip a switch and summit volcanoes, because you asked me 2 years
Mhm.
ago if I thought I was going to try Rainier. I'd be like, maybe one day. And then
Yeah.
last summer, I was like, I think I'm actually going to do that. And then I started
Yeah.
developing skills, doing the things, being more consistent. And this year I was like, oh. And when we were doing it, I was like, I was literally singing. I was like, this is easy,
Mm.
because I was consistent doing everything else. I didn't just one day be like, yeah, I'm going to go summit a 14er.
Yeah.
No, I was like, I'm going to go do Adams, which is another volcano. I'm going to go do Baker, which is another volcano. I'm going to summit these other really cool mountains that is going to prep me to be the person that I'm going to be in order to run a business that has $100,000 take home pay.
Mhm.
I'm going to do all of these things that actually creates a business that lets me take home $100,000. Like, you can't just overnight do something. You have to show up consistently. You don't win the gold medal in the Olympic pool. You win it in your home pool. You
Mm.
know, like, the consistency, you do one thing, you do it everywhere,
Well, that's
like,
why I really, like, always caution people when they compare themselves to other people who have success. Because, like, even, if someone says, "How do you have the business that you have?" or whatever it may be, I'm like, "I've been doing this for 6 years."
yeah.
And it was 18 months into my business when my coach at the time was like, "You don't deserve to be a seven-figure business owner because you are not operating like a seven-figure business owner." And basically what he was
Oh,
saying is,
what a
"Nice
humble,
try." Yeah, what a great
punch.
guy.
What a
I
great, no, I
I love
love
him
it
to
because it's like,
pieces.
I love it because, like, in the moment you were like, well, F you, like, I
Yeah.
want this. But looking back, you're like, you were so right.
After I got off that call, I was originally so pissed because I was like, "I'm paying you to coach me, and you just insulted me." But then I got
Mhm.
off the call, and I realized, you know what? He's 100% right. Like, what did I eat today? I had caffeine, black coffee, and a piece of chocolate because I thought I was gonna pass out in between calls. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if we're really gonna be honest with ourselves, I think there's something here maybe as to what he's noting. And what I realized was at that moment, again, back to what we said today, like, there's just so many ties between all of it. It's a choice.
It's a
Like,
choice.
choosing to succeed in your business and in your life, it is a choice. You and the person beside you have two decisions in front of you. To your point, do you eat the takeout or do you eat the food from home? Do you decide to be consistent and be like, I don't really feel like going and moving today because I've had a lot of calls? Or you like 3, 2, 1, go. I know how my body's going to feel afterwards.
Mhm.
And it's the thing that I think is hard for people to acknowledge or understand is that the big success you see is a byproduct of all these tiny, tiny little pieces and actions that
Yes.
they're taking over a matter of a 30 days, 60 days, 6 months, a year, 5 years. And then you're like, well, how do they do all of that? It's like, because every single little decision for you, for example, if you're like, hey, we're not going to be, what should I have for breakfast every day of the week? Because we're not playing that game. This is a little decision that I make that buys me time, mental peace, balance in my harmony of my schedule. That's something you've built into your rhythm, but
Mhm.
that's started from your identity of how you choose to operate your week and your day.
Mhm.
And so
And
all of
some
what,
of them start as accidents. Like, I didn't
yeah,
go in being like, I'm going to find the breakfast that I will never change. I've been
yeah,
drinking the same smoothie, I kid you not, since 2017, 7 year, almost 8 years.
wow.
That's insane. I am a psychopath. Like,
I mean, I'm right there with you. I eat the exact same thing basically every single day, Monday to Friday. Every
mhm.
single day, it's
It's,
literally eggs and sourdough, chicken and rice, beef or bison and rice in the evening.
I
Done.
love that. I love
Like,
that because it truly, like, and it tastes so good every time. And I wake up every morning and I'm so excited to eat it. Like, that's what I think is wild. There's no other food. There's no other meals that I do that for, that I'm like that excited every single day. I don't know why this smoothie has passed like the test of
the test
time.
of time.
And my
But you know what it also has done is it's worked its way into your disciplines.
yeah.
That's what it is. It's a tool that has worked its way into your rhythm. And
Mhm.
so now because it's so baked into your rhythm at such a deep level, you're like, "If I remove the smoothie,
I can't. Oh my
what would
god. I started dating this guy once. This is hilarious. I started dating this guy once and he was like, we're going camping for like 3 days. And he was like, I've got breakfast taken care of. And I was like, what is it? And he was like, don't worry about it. And I was like, no,
No, I'm actually
what?
very
I'm
worried."
actually really worried about it. What is it? And
Yeah.
he was like, don't worry about it. And we had been seeing each other for like a month. So like, we don't know it. And I'm like,
We're not at that
we're
place where you
not
can
at that
remove my
place where I
smoothie.
can trust him. And he was so sweet. He made me a smoothie, or like he had to ask me what was in my smoothie. It didn't taste
Yeah,
like my smoothie, but I did understand it. But I
tried.
did break him to tell me what it was. And I was like, wow, I have so much anxiety about my breakfast. Like, I can't let it go. I can't let it go.
It's routine.
It's
It's literally
routine.
routine.
It
I
makes me
have
feel
somebody
good.
that I know who has, like, taken a couple companies, and we were talking about routines, and they've taken a couple of companies to 1 billion, and I was like, "What's, like, your shtick?" Like, every entrepreneur's got a thing. Like,
Mhm.
you've got your smoothie. For me, mine's coffee. I have a very specific coffee I have to find daily. If I don't find it, I'm off. And, I had asked him, I was like, "What's your thing?" And he was like, "My feet have to be on the ground." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I get out of bed, if it's someone's apartment, condo, hotel, townhouse, don't care, snow, rain, mud, summer, doesn't matter,
Like earth.
earth within
Earth.
5
Oh my God.
seconds of waking, throws on a hoodie, sometimes robe, whatever is easily accessible, and beelines from the bed to earth
Outside.
to put, like, bare feet in the snow, whatever it is, and sun on the face within moments of waking
I love
for
that.
circadian rhythm. And I was like, "Even in the snow?" He's like, "Even in the snow," because it just became so ingrained as a ritual that he's like, "I go outside, I stand in the sun, and I'm in nature, and I chug water, and I chug the water while I'm out there, and I don't get to go inside till the water's done." And when I heard that, I was like, "That's psychotic." But on the other hand, I thought,
I
"That's a
I
routine."
It's a
That's a
routine, and honestly, a little part of me was like, "Maybe I should add that to my." I was like, "That
Yeah,
sounds cool. That sounds
yeah,
fun." I love,
yeah,
obviously, some hippie and some nature shit, but I also think that, like, truly another soapbox I will stand on, I don't think you can be successful without being a little psychotic, like, truly. I think,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
there
yeah.
is truly like, the definition of insanity. You get punched and you stand back up and you go, "Let's go again."
Again, yeah.
Like you're like, that punch I learned, I can do something better because of it. Like, you
Mhm.
cannot be successful without being a little psychotic, truly.
Well, I would say 1,000% I agree, and the other thing that I also heard about entrepreneurs, and I was like, "I actually love that," is that entrepreneurs are some of the laziest individuals, and the reason that
Yeah.
they are is because entrepreneurs always wanna do it with the path of least resistance. Like, "That seems too hard. Can we do it simpler?"
Can
Or,
we do
"That
it
seems
easier?
like" yeah, there
I
must
don't
be
want to do
another
that.
way to do
There
what all those other people are doing, and that's what leads to innovation. It leads to creation of finding a new path and finding a new approach to doing something that the masses or most people do and doing it in a more effective, more impactful, more successful way. And so, someone had said, a lot of entrepreneurs are super lazy. And originally I was like, what are you talking about? But they're like,
We're the
that's
most
why
hardworking
yeah.
people,
I was like, we
but
we crush. But then on the other hand, I thought, it's true because we're constantly problem solving. And that's because we really are trying to always constantly find the path of least resistance. And so,
yeah.
I really wanted to dive into today's topic, even to your, point of like, we have to be all a little bit crazy. And I so agree with that because I think that there are, everyone has their own opinions on this. I think entrepreneurs can be created, but I also think that there's an innate entrepreneur in some people.
Yeah.
And I think some people have it. They have the ability to push their limits. They have the ability to decide they want to be someone different on a Wednesday and actually become that person. And then I think there's, most people, which is, to be honest, a good portion of society is cool being who they always have been
Hmm.
because it's fine for them. They can do the Netflix and wine because they're good with it. They
Hmm.
can be the same person and have the same identity because they don't need anything else. They feel fine with where they're at. And if that's okay with like where you're at right now, that's okay. If that
Hmm.
feels truly good and you're fulfilled, I'm cool with that. But if you're at a point, which is why I want to dive in today, where you're not feeling fulfilled and you're feeling like you have the potential to be doing more, becoming more, achieving more, it's these practices that are going to help you to really unlock that. So just want to say a massive thank you for coming on. Today's
Yeah.
conversation was so good. My brain was nerding out the entire way. If somebody wants to dive more into this work, learning more from you, you also have a podcast. Like,
I
give me a
do.
couple of places where someone can find you if they want to sink their teeth in more.
Yeah. So definitely follow me on Instagram, True Adventure Co. And you can find everything there. But really, I would say the biggest thing, obviously, bold statement. I'm bold. I'm ballsy. I love it. Hire me, honestly. Come into the Summit Mentality program. It's a 6-month program. It's where we build consistency. Like the reason I make it 6 months, the reason why, Kate, I'm sure you make yours
Yep.
a set amount of time is showing up again and again and again. The True Adventure podcast is a free resource for that, of showing up consistently and trying new things, bite-sized chunks of like, what can we do right now for free? True Adventure podcast is my podcast, and I'll give Kate all these links so you can, have all these things
Amazing.
too. But the Summit Mentality program for sure is like the best way to show up consistently. And if you're like, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, and I don't know how I need to stop choosing stress and overwhelm, let
Mm-hmm.
me teach you. Let me show you how to be the 6-figure earner, the $1 million business, all of those things before you have the $1 million in your bank account, because you have to
Yeah.
become that person first before you can have it. Steve Jobs didn't become Steve Jobs, like the day he became the Apple earner, right? He
Yeah.
did it in his weird dark room programming stuff,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's where it happens. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And so being consistent is truly like, I guess, the theme of our whole talk today. But come into the Summit Mentality program. That will be such a great way to do it. And I, of course, standalone retreats as well, that if you're like, I'm not a 6-month person, I'm a intensive, give me a shot in the arm, give me a punch in the face and let's go.
I love it.
And I do those as well. But
And
definitely hit
I
me up on
honestly,
Instagram.
it goes back to what you said earlier too, of just like the people that you're around. I think one of the things that I will say, like even for myself and investing in coaching like this, being at retreats like you're talking about, it is something I'm constantly doing and putting myself in, to your earlier point starting today, putting yourself in the right rooms, because when you are around other people who summit, it
Yeah.
challenges you to tap into new parts of yourself that you didn't even know were in there. And so I also think being around conversations like today, being around people who are as driven as you, and then again, it doesn't have to be in a perfectly transferable industry,
Mm-mm.
but just being around people who embody the values of the kind of person you want to be at things like this
Mm-hmm.
is one of the fastest ways to, just as a byproduct of being in the environment, start to become that person, even if you're just really early on in this work of doing it yourself.
Truly. And I'm going to add one more thing, but it's being in those rooms and using someone else's success to be like, if she can do it, I can do it. One of my
Mhm.
friends is going for $500,000 this year. And I was like, a year ago, I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. And now I'm like, she wants to hang out with me and she like learns from me. And why the hell wouldn't I be able to do $500,000? And I
Yep.
look at my 9 to 5er friends. One of my best friends is a financial advisor, and she doesn't have a college degree. She like quite literally is working towards her bachelor's right now, and she's 32 years old. And I used to think you had to do all of these things in order to be successful, have a college degree, maybe even a master's, maybe a PhD, maybe, whatever. And this girl is one of the highest earners of all of our friends. And she has a high school education. I mean, she's
Yep.
badass. She's amazing. And that's not the only education she has, obviously. But like, she literally doesn't have what I used to think was like a standard.
Mhm.
And so be in the room with those people, and their success may not look anything like yours, but you can be like, if this person is doing that thing, why can't I do that thing? Or why can't
Yep.
I do something like it?
Yep.
Choose your room very wisely. If you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Also, I don't think that you should be the dumbest person in the room, because
Mm.
if you are forever the dumbest person in the room, one day you're going to believe that you're the dumbest person on the planet. So you need to be somewhere in the middle. Step into the room where you are the smartest person for
Mm.
like 10 minutes. Step into the room where you're the dumbest person for 10 minutes.
Mhm.
But step into a room where you're going to be challenged and where you're going to pull somebody else up. Like being in the middle is the best way to do it.
Yeah, one of the quotes I used to say all the time was like, if you want to be a shark, be around other sharks. Like if you
Mhm.
want to know how they operate, know how they move, know how they think, it's the fastest way to be able to,
Absolutely.
people always say like, what's the shortcut to success?
Be around
Literally just learn
successful
from
people.
people who've already done it
Yeah.
in whatever bucket. That doesn't even have to be business. It can be in any bucket. I so agree with that. Today was so good. I feel like we probably could have gone for 4 hours.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I feel like
Sometimes
I am
sometimes
shortcutting
these
myself by turning this off, but I was like, I also fully recognize that I did not sign you up for 4 hours. So
you're
maybe
good.
we'll need a part 2 one
A
day.
part 2, say less. Or you can come on the True
Yeah.
Adventure podcast and we
Yeah.
can hear more about that
Continue.
and
Yeah.
continue. And then people can be like, oh, yeah, there we go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for
Of
today.
course.
And of course, guys, like as she said, she has her free podcast. She's got retreats if you want to her. I love that quote, by the way, the shot in the arm. You've got the more an ongoing process of really integrating these different principles and frameworks into helping you to become that person. There's so many different ways to do it. You guys know that I'm a huge advocate in coaching. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be her. Just finding somebody
Mhm.
who really can be in your corner to be that guiding light for you to help you to shortcut to where you want to go. So thank you so much, Karina. It was so
Of
exciting to have
course.
you on, and it was such a good conversation. And as always, you guys, we'll see you guys next week. And as always, stay ambitious.